Well, interesting that you should talk about public safety because Oakland,
Yes.
where you were a police officer at
Right.
least a decade ago or a
Right.
sergeant a decade ago, cut out at least 80 officers from its force. And I think San Jose recently cut officers from
Yes.
its force.
Mhm.
So how then do you, just taking police officers, how do you cut police officers and still maintain city services?
Right. The way we've done it in East Palo Alto, obviously coming back from the police chief position, is we've probably cut the department about 20% authorized staffing over the last 6 or 7 years. And so part of that creative is finding alternate funding sources. So the city has dramatically increased the amount of grants we get. So a lot of services now come from grants from the federal government. We've increased private-public partnerships. And we're using the strategies that get to more of the root causes of crime that may require less staff than dealing with the symptoms of crime, which requires putting a lot of cops in the field. So in that sense, you're going to have to be, excuse the phrase, and this is a phrase that we have in policing, smart on crime. And the smarter we are on crime, the more we're based on intelligence, the more we focus on those things that we know are people that are causing the crime, then you can manage that with fewer staffing. So many agencies have cut, but quite frankly, East Palo Alto Police Department has been one of the lowest staffed police departments in the country for the last decade. But as a result, we're still seeing crime reductions. We have individual spikes from time to time. We see increased programs that are based on community policing, problem solving, that are evidence-based, more engagement, more reliance on the community. So when you have fewer officers, then you need more eyes, you need more community members. So you have to have a strong relationship with the community. So really, in many cases, public safety is impacted by the amount of officers. You can't go too low, but just adding officers does not necessarily make you safer.
Well,
either.
let's talk about policies. For example, the mayor of San Francisco said that he was going to consider stop and frisk
Right.
because New York seems to have reduced its crime rate using those policies.
Right.
So, and now his office says, well, he's considering various options. So let's talk about stop and frisk.
Right.
It's something that's very controversial.
Yes. It's a, for those at home, it's a practice where you would stop, and the frisk would be the pat search of people. And some use it as a tactic to address crime increases in neighborhoods, or as a strategy. I'm not in favor of it as a strategy. I think the consequences of stop and frisk as a strategy ruins, or it can strain a relationship between the police department and the community. And going back to my earlier thing, that the fewer officers you have, the more you need the community. So to do a few stops, if you're basically alienating the entire community, then the return on the investment is just not there.
So why would this be to alienate the community? If a police officer walking down the street sees someone who looks suspicious and he stops him
Right.
or her,
Right.
why would this alienate the community?
Historically, the question would be, what does look suspicious mean? And unfortunately, too often that means young men of color that are in neighborhoods that we've deemed as being high crime. And so one of the things that research is showing us across the board is that people's view of how the police are effective is less on the issue of crime and more on the issue of fairness. Is it a fair process? Was I treated equal? Did I have respect? That's how they evaluate whether or not the police department is engaging in a proper activity. Because I may reduce crime, but to do that, if I'm stopping every young black or Hispanic male in the city, I'm pat searching them, I'm disrespecting the community, then something tells me the community, and all evidence suggests the community is not going to be happy about the crime reduction.
Well, given East Palo Alto's level of crime, one would think anything that would reduce the crime would be acceptable. Like what's more important, fairness or crime reduction?
I think the challenge would be is, for me, as either the chief or the city manager, is not to give the community that choice. And in other words, I think it's very inappropriate for the community to have to pick between their civil liberties and their safety. And that one, in my opinion, is the requisite of the other. In other words, in order to make you safe, then the best thing I can do is to make sure that I'm treating you fairly, that I'm operating within the Constitution, that we are using intelligence to identify who's doing the crimes, and that I have your support, that you're willing to call me, you're willing to partner with me. If crime reduction was the end all for everything, then we might as well go ahead and suspend the Constitution. I can kick in 10 doors right now where all the dope dealers are at. I could violate people's searches rights and basically get cocaine and all kinds of drugs. But that's not what this country is based on. this country is a democracy. We're based on freedoms. We're based on the fact that people have rights. And I think the police can, must, and will do it in a manner that respects the Constitution and respects the value and still reduce crime and violence.
That's your opinion. And I'm wondering how widespread is the acceptance of your opinion?
I think it's widespread. I think it's growing exponentially because law enforcement is learning that it cannot succeed in crime. One is crime reduction is not at the complete control of the police department. And once the chief accepts that, and we're learning that, then to really reduce crime in the community, then it requires the community to partner with the police, and the police department becomes a tool of the community, not the depression force of the community. Once we accept that, then you almost have to have strong relations to be successful.
Now, that's the theory, and it sounds quite good. However, it seems the trend nowadays, for example, with the Patriot Act and the surveillance and reconnaissance and all of the tools that technical tools that police departments have, it seems the trend is towards a reduction in civil liberties across the board.
I don't know if I agree with that, and a good example is the Arizona law. When the Supreme Court made their decision, which unfortunately part of it I disagree with, and I think it's going to be very bad for many communities, especially communities that look like ours. But when they were hearing the case, the Arizona Police Chiefs Association, I signed on an amicus brief with the Arizona Police Chiefs Association, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, major city police chiefs, and chiefs all around the country that opposed the legislation. That made it very clear to the Supreme Court and to the legislators that this will do nothing but hurt the relationship between the police departments, local police departments, and communities of color, especially our Hispanic community. And those are the relationships we need to be effective. And so trying to figure out someone's papers or immigration does not work for us. And the return on that investment is not there. In other words, we'll alienate an entire community that will shut down, won't engage, and we cannot reduce crime without our communities working with us. So law enforcement stepped up and said, we are not in support of this legislation.